Hey now, today I am going to be taking a stab at a recipe that I've been mulling over for quite some time and I'm very much excited about it. It is a pizza sourdough. Now for this I'm going to be winding up incorporating some delicious pizza sauce, cheese, toppings, all kinds of fun stuff. So with no further ado, let's get started. So my leaven is currently rising and I'm estimating I'm about an hour or two away from that fermentation being ready to go. So I'm going to start off with my actual dough. I'm going to use 500 grams of just strong baker's flour, and I've got filtered water here. And this is 360 grams, so that's 72% hydration. I'm just going to fire that flour into there. And now I'm going to mix it for a minute or two until it is totally combined. And there we are, ready for the autolyse. So after 2 hours there of autolyse, my leaven is ready to go. Look at that, it's beautiful, pillowy, and ready to add. So I'm going to be putting in 25% leaven, which is 125 grams is what I'm shooting for here. So I'm just going to scrape this off my spoon, get it into my dough. It's really sticky today. Oh, very close. And perfect. All right, now I'm going to moisten my hands just with some filtered water here so that hopefully things don't stick to me quite as badly. And I'm going to initially just use my fingers to punch some of that leaven into this dough. And then probably over the course of the next minute or two, I'm just going to use this pinch and fold method to incorporate the leaven. All right, well that's really quite all nicely combined there. So what I'm going to do now is just cover this up with plastic, return it to a warm place, give it 30 minutes, and then we'll be ready for the next step. So after half an hour, it is time to add my salt. So I have fine sea salt here, and I've got 7 grams. I'm going for 1.4% with that, and that's a little bit less than I normally use because I'm going to be adding more salt via pepperoni and cheese and stuff like that. So again, I'm just going to use my fingers to punch that, to drive it down into the dough. And now I'm just going to use this pinch and fold method again here to incorporate that. All right, and there we go. So I'm going to cover this back up here with the plastic, get it back to a warm place, and in 30 minutes we will go for a stretch and fold. All right, so it's time for our first stretch and fold. So I'm just going to do 4 stretches of this dough, rotating at 90 degrees each time. This dough is still a little firm. Stretch it, and then I'm going to cover it back up and let it sit for 30 minutes in a warm space. And in the meantime, I'm also going to saute these mushrooms so that they're ready to add. So this was 15% or 75 grams. It was 3 large mushrooms, and I just sliced them up and threw in a little bit of olive oil, lightly seasoned them with kosher salt, a little cracked pepper, and just a little bit of garlic powder actually. And I've just reduced them down to get a little bit of caramelization and to get rid of some of that water weight. All right, so I actually let this dough go 45 minutes, and it is now time for the lamination. And this is where I'm going to start to add all of that fun stuff that is going to make this into pizza sourdough. So I'm just spraying down my surface here with some filtered water just to help the dough be able to release once I'm done with it. And again, moistening my hands. Just going to pull the dough out, pop it down, and now we begin the process of trying to stretch this out as thinly as possible. And what I'm looking for ideally is a nice, relatively thin rectangle. that I can use to sort of incorporate these ingredients. So this will just take me a minute or two to get it stretched out. All right, there we go. Now, I was originally tempted to add the cheese earlier on. However, I think it would have made this lamination process just a little bit more difficult. It wouldn't have wanted to stretch out quite as nicely as this. But anyway, here we go. So I've got it in a nice rectangle shape. And now my ingredients here, I've got 35% or 175 grams of pizza mozzarella that I cubed up. I've got 30% or 150 grams of pepperoni that I cut into nice cubes as well. I do have those mushrooms, and then I've got some of my lovely mother-in-law's beautiful homemade pizza sauce. And I've got this in a 250 ml jar. I wasn't quite sure how much of this I was going to use, so we'll wait and see. Now, with this lamination, I'm going to go ahead and put a bunch of this cheese on here, like so. And I cubed it instead of just shredding it or grating it because I'm hoping that some of it sort of retains in like nice little pools of cheese as opposed to kind of melting down into nothingness. So we get some of that in there. We get some of this awesome pepperoni in here. You just use whatever your favorite pepperoni is in this. Some of these mushrooms. This will be a fun little pepperoni and mushroom sourdough. And then I'm going to take some of this pizza sauce, just kind of drop some dollops of it here and there, like so. Then I'm going to go ahead and fold over a third of that dough, and we're going to repeat. Get some of this cheese in here. Right about there. Pepperoni is a really solid way to incorporate these big chunky ingredients throughout your sourdough without having to worry about it during the mixing phase. And some more sauce. Try not to get too much of it right next to the edges there, just because that might wind up causing a bit of an issue with sealing things up. Fold that part over, give it a little tap each time. Getting down to the end of my ingredients here, which is perfect. That. I'm just doing it in the middle of this strip here. And get some of this sauce in here. Like so. Fold over once. This is where the last of the ingredients make it in. Trying to get it on here and letting it stick to the dough so it doesn't just fall off. Last of those mushrooms. And some of the sauce here. So I'd say I probably used about 200 mils of this pizza sauce here. I wound up with that much left in the jar. And we're going to just stretch this, fold it right up over the top there. And now we've got this crazy mountain sourdough. I'm going to set it into the bowl, back into the bowl. I'm going to cover it back up with plastic wrap and then let it sit for about half an hour, and then we'll check on it. Okay, so after half an hour of hanging out, I'm going to give this probably a bit of a modified coil fold, just because I don't think it's going to want to cooperate too much because of all that pizza sauce that's in there. So I'm just kind of wrapping it around, stretching it a little bit like that. Boom. And I'm going to leave it like this now. I'm not going to mess with it any further. It had that one stretch and fold. It had that lamination. It had this little mini kind of coil-ish fold now. And I'm going to let it just ferment. All right, so I wound up giving this about almost an hour and a half or so after that pseudo coil fold. And I'm just flouring part of the countertop here, and I'm also going to flour my hands because I'm going to pop this out onto the counter here. Woo! It'll kinds of goodness there. So because this is being a little sloppy, I'm just going to manipulate this here with the bench knife. A little bit more flour. I'm gonna kind of swirl it a little bit and just do a pre-shape here. When there's this much stuff inside your sourdough, it's kind of hard to tell the degree of fermentation that's taken place, but now that I'm actually manipulating it, I can tell that it kind of saw enough, so that's good. All right, it's also holding its shape fairly well because of all of that. I'm gonna just plunk it over here, tuck over the pepperoni and whatnot that just popped out, and cover it up. I'm going to give it 10 minutes, and then we are going to do a final shape. All right, after that 10 minutes, I'm just going to flour up my hands here again, and kind of pop this sourdough over here. Just do a light final shaping. Didn't really lose too much of the existing shape during that 10-minute rest. And there we go. Just going to use the bench knife, and I'm going to pop it into this lined rice floured banneton. I'm going to let it sit overnight, covered in the fridge, and then we'll bake in the morning. All right, morning of the bake. My oven has been preheating nicely with the cast iron at 500 degrees, and it is time to get this bread in the oven. Just with some parchment paper and my pizza peel here, I'm going to flip it over. Take a look at that, awesome. A little bit extra rice flour on it, and then I'm going to probably just give it a really simple scoring pattern here, just to let it rise. And pop it into the oven. I'm going to get it covered up here with my combo cooker, and then I'm going to reduce the heat down to 440 degrees and give it 30 minutes. So after 30 minutes, we're going to pop off the lids here. Oh man, look at that. Totally flaking apart. Awesome. Okay, so I'm just going to drop this down to 430 degrees now, and we'll check on it in somewhere just over 20 minutes. So after actually about 26 minutes at 430, I'm just going to pop this out and get it off onto this rack. We're going to let it cool down, and then we'll be slicing into her in a little bit. This smells exactly like a pizza. I don't think I've ever had to try so hard to restrain cutting into a sourdough while I waited for everything to set up, but here we are. So it is time to slice into this bread here. Now taking a look at it, one of the obvious things is that the oven spring isn't quite as high as some of my other sourdoughs, just like this regular sourdough I baked at the same time. However, pizzas are reasonably flat, so I'm gonna just roll with it. Now, slicing in. Oh, look at that! All kinds of pepperoni, there's cheese, there's mushrooms. This actually smells exactly like a cold pizza right now. So, you know what? I'm gonna toast them up here and see what it tastes like. All right, here we are, heated up, glistening with butter. Oh. This is exactly what I was after. It's like a nice, moist, chewy pizza. It's got all that pepperoni in there. There's just the right amount of pizza sauce. There's cheese. There's those sautéed mushrooms. This is amazing. All it needs now is some chicken wings and we're good to go. So yeah, pizza for breakfast or as a snack later on in the day via sourdough. Fantastic. So until next time, keep her at 11.